Wait. Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40! Can't wait! Let's go!
Making us part of your morning routine, however it is that you were joining us this morning, whether it's live on Facebook, maybe you're watching live on YouTube, maybe you're over on Roku TV watching us there. We appreciate you being part of this. I am Chris, and of course, that is Mo. Mo, how are you this morning, sir?
Doing well. We're getting that much closer to Christmas. More importantly, very interesting game. The finish of the Eagles game, it was a little crazy.
Mo, there was never a point last night where I really believed the Eagles were going to lose that game. I really thought the conversation this morning was going to be, we don't criticize ugly wins. You get the win, you do what you got to do. And then maybe we talk a little bit about the turnovers of, Jalen Hurts. And I thought that's kind of where the conversation was going to go this morning. But as we all saw, Drew Lock really saved the season, at least for now, for the Seattle Seahawks. He led a game-winning drive against a defense that continues to struggle on third downs. And very similar to what the Dolphins experienced a little over a week ago, the Eagles now have a bad loss on their record. And I know that, they had the New York Giants lost before, but that was an elite defense playing at an elite level at the time. Let's be honest. The Seahawks loss it's a bad loss. It's a bad quarterback. It's a team that had lost 4 in a row. They were barely hanging on to the edge of the cliff. They had already gone over the edge. They were just trying to hang on and not fall off. Agreed. And they figured out a way to do that. So, Mo, what did you see last night from the Philly side of things? Because this is not the time of the season to be losing 3 games in a row.
I felt like, as you already alluded to, that this was going to be another game where the Eagles did just enough to win. We were going to have this conversation about how they weren't dominant. The offense didn't get those explosive plays that you're used to seeing them get, but it was enough. And we don't criticize wins. We point out flaws, but we don't criticize wins. We say at the end of the day, they won the game. And then we also follow up with, and they're not even playing their best football yet. We've said that about the Eagles the entire season. And that game played out pretty much like most of their games have played out this season, except they lost. They lost in the end. And when I look at this Philly team, I think there are concerns. Look, teams have adjusted. They are taking away A.J. Brown more. They are attacking Jalen Hurts more. They're coming at him. And the ones who have the ability, at least talent-wise, defensively, they're having a spy on Jalen Hurts. So they're kind of closing down his running lanes more, not to mention Jalen Hurts is not 100%. I'm looking at an Eagles team that, again, look at the record. They're still, when you look at the NFC, because the NFC is top-heavy, they're still one of the 3 best teams in the NFC, right? At worst 4, but they're still one of the top teams in the NFC. The question is, though, we're getting closer to the playoffs. And this version of the Eagles, they can't win a first-round playoff game. They can't. I just don't think I don't think they're good enough right now collectively because they don't seem to be all on the same page. And I thought it was interesting that in the post-game interview, Hurts kind of went on this little, I want to call it a speech, where he basically questioned the commitment or said that everybody needed to recommit to the team and to the goal at hand. And I know some fans are going to love that. And I think others might look at it and go, I don't know, dude, if you want to be calling out teammates and saying they're not doing their part, because it's not like he played great either. I just think that you want to galvanize your team. You can start and end with, we need to play better. We can be better. No question. That's a fact. And leave it at that. I don't know about questioning everybody's commitment.
We get on quarterbacks a lot. Josh Allen does this a lot. It doesn't matter what happens in a Buffalo Bills game. You know that at the end of the day, Josh Allen's going to shoulder all the blame. It doesn't matter if Stephon Diggs dropped the ball. It doesn't matter if the running back fumbled 3 times. It doesn't matter if the offense kept scoring and the defense kept giving up points in the back end. Josh Allen will shoulder all of the blame during a Buffalo Bills post-game press conference when they lose. Just like he will give all the credit to other players when they win. And I will never take that away from Josh Allen. And we make fun of him sometimes because, it's quarterback talk, right? Well, I feel like last night after the Eagles game, we needed some quarterback talk from Jalen Hurts. Now, if you want to go to the locker room and you want to call people out and you want to address people, do that. Do that behind closed doors. Let Nick Sirianni do that. That's fine. But I have an issue when you are the quarterback and you did not play well passing the football. I know that he ran for 80 plus yards last night, and he's been running more as of late, which is great. But when you pass for $143 and your completion percentage is around 50%, and you throw 2 picks, and you now, oh, by the way, you're tied for the most turnovers combined between interceptions and fumbles lost in the NFL this season, that's not where you should be. That's not the level of quarterback that the Eagles need to be successful. So if you yourself are not there, and that's not how he led. He didn't open up with, I haven't been playing my best football. I haven't been playing up to my level. He opened up with, we need to recommit, which means, I know he's part of we, but that's not how it comes off. That comes off as there's other people who are not committed to winning football, and you are calling them out. So who are they, Mo? Who is not committed to winning football? Because I didn't see anyone quit on the team last night. I didn't see anyone running the wrong routes. They made the big change on defense. Didn't seem to really help on third down all that much. The focus with the broadcast last night was very much on the defensive play calling. They kept showing Desai up in the box. They kept showing Patricia down the sidelines. But yet on the field, we were pretty much getting the same product. So I don't know who the recommitment is geared towards. And maybe in Jalen's mind, that is quarterback talk. Maybe he thinks that was him just saying something generic to rally the troops. But if I'm Brown or Smith or any of their skill players on offense, I'm sitting there in the locker room like, we need to recommit. We're not committed. We're not in this thing. We're not the one throwing picks in critical situations. We're not the one having the most turnovers in the league this season.
And I think there's frustration, right? Jalen's clearly frustrated. You know the line. You talk to a player right after a tough loss. They're in their emotions. They're still in the heat of the moment. I don't think he meant to call out players. I don't think that's his nature. But I do think that's how it kind of came off to some. Like, who needs to play harder? I don't think there's if you watch the game, it was a hard-hitting back-and-forth game. They played hard. And don't forget, they're up against a Seattle team that's desperate, that has to have this game, or they're out of the playoffs. They're out of the picture. They needed that game. We talk a lot this season about stories. And you and I right now, we're riding high on the Baker Mayfield train. I love stories. If you followed Drew Lock's career, and I know a lot of the average fan is like, who? The point I'm making is Drew Lock has had his share of ups and downs in the NFL. A lot of people had written him off, and here comes Drew Lock. He actually played well and made plays when he needed to. And this isn't one of those things where Seattle doesn't have a quarterback controversy, but we talk about this all the time. Can your backup quarterback pick your team up and win a game when your number one guy is out? Drew Lock won a big, tough game when their number one guy was out. I was impressed with what he did. I was impressed with Seattle's defense because we're not talking about them enough. Like, I thought they made plays. I thought they played well. It's strange, right? Because I'm sure some Philly fans will go, well, we left a lot of points on the field. You can make that case. But when you turn the football over, like Jalen did a couple of times, and what you pointed out, now he's number one in turnovers, or he's right there with Josh Allen, right, on some level in turnovers, then that's a problem. Here's something I want to ask you, Chris. He said, I haven't been playing my best football. I know what my best football looks like. Jalen had a great breakout dominant season last year, an MVP caliber season. The year before that, he did not have that type of season. If you remember, the year before that, they were questioning whether he was going to be the Eagles quarterback again. And he did turn the ball over a lot. That was one of his problems. He didn't read defenses as well. That was one of his problems. I'm saying that to say this. I'm hearing people say words like he's regressed or he's not what he was. And I'm wondering, is he what he was? Like, you have to go on your body of work of who you are as a football player. I think Jalen at his height can be a great football player. But I think when he's not at his best, he can be mediocre at times. So in the 3 years of being a starter, he's had the not so great season, he's had the monster season, and then he's had this season right here. I would say the true Jalen is somewhere in the middle. And so it's easy to go, well, he's one of the elite quarterbacks. We think he is because he made such a leap last year. But the argument that you would make with a Purdy or the argument that you would make with any other young quarterback having a monster season is, we need to see you do this over a sustained period of time before we go, you're one of those guys, right? You're a Mahomes, you're Burrow. What I'm saying is on that level. And we haven't really seen a body of work that says Jalen Hurts is going to be this guy for the next 5 or 6 years. We don't know that. What I do know is of his talent and his potential and his work ethic. But he struggled this season. And it's not for lack of weapons. It's not for lack of talent on the outside or in the middle with the tight ends and the running backs. There's something missing with Philly. And you could say, yes, the defense especially is not great on third down. That's a given. They're not getting to the quarterbacks like they were last season. That's up front. Everybody knows that. But offensively, they're not nearly as explosive or dominant as they were last year as well either. And I think you can look and say that on both sides of the football, they've had struggles. And to go back to what he said about we need to recommit, I think everybody's competing hard, but they're just not as good as they were last year. That's the cut. Now you can look at the record. Again, the record says they're a very good football team. I say they're a very good football team. I don't think they're a dominant football team. Last year, they were a dominant football team.
I think with Jalen, because you're right, Mel, if you look at his numbers, and I have his numbers here in front of me. If you look at his numbers from 2021, 61% completion percentage, just over 3,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, 9 picks, right? Then he has the bump up, 3,700 yards, passing in the same amount of games, 15 first season in 2021, which I get it. It was really his second season, but his first full season.
Right.
His second full season, he plays another 15. What changed? Well, yeah, he had 600 more yards passing. His touchdowns bumped from 16 to 22. That's only 6. And then his interceptions dropped from 9 to 6. So he was a little bit better across the board in all his stats. But I would argue the biggest change was the team overall. 14-1 was his record in those 15 games. And Mo, when you're going 14-1, everything you do looks better. So there's a big difference, in my opinion, at least, from when you're 8-7 and you're 14-1. So when he was 8-7, his numbers weren't terrible. They were a middle of the pack. But then his numbers bump up a little bit, 6 more touchdown passes in the same amount of games, 3 less picks, 600 more yards passing, and the record jumps to 14-1.
Where's
and now
his rushing yards?
We'll get to that in a second. It's about consistent. His rushing yards are consistent. So you're like, okay, he's playing, MVP level football. Okay, sure. I mean, his numbers were good. I don't know if they were spectacular. And then you look at his numbers this season with 14 games in, so he's 1 game behind those other 2 seasons. He's at 3,300 yards passing right now. You figure he'll be probably just a smidge under the 3,700 from last year. Right 19 touchdowns this season. If he throws 2 or 3 touchdowns, he'll be right where he was touchdown-wise after 15 games last season. He's got 12 picks this season. That's already doubled from where he was last season. So that's one of the biggest issues with him currently. And then, like you just alluded to, if we go look at the rushing numbers real quick, he's about the same across the board rushing wise. He rushed for 784 in 2021. He rushed for 760 in 2022. He's only at 542 this season. But a lot of that is they try to rush him less early in the season.
Right.
They're rushing him more later in the season. I'm guessing that over the next 3 games, he's probably going to end somewhere around that 700.
Yeah.
Right. So I think he's going to be in the same category, even though it's more games played with his rushing yards. But Mo, the number that's remained the consistent is the fumbles. So in 2020, in 15 games, 4 games started, he had 9 fumbles. 15 games started 2021, 9 fumbles. 15 games started 2022, 9 fumbles. 14 games started 2023, 8 fumbles. So I would argue he's been consistent with what he is. And that brings back a great point that you just made, Mo. They were questioning this before the Super Bowl run. Was he the guy? They were looking at trading for Russell Wilson. I don't know. I don't think they should trade him. I don't either. No, I don't think he's either. The issue. But what I'm saying is, this is about what he is. And what he is looks great when you have a top 5 defense, right? And you're getting all these takeaways and you're great on third downs and you're getting to the quarterback. But the defense isn't doing that this year. They're the worst defense on third down. They're the worst defense quarterback pressure on third down. So what are you seeing? You're seeing games that are a lot closer. Is this not what we talk about with Josh Allen? When games are tight, what happens with Josh Allen? The turnovers seem to pop up more. They're not popping up more. He turns the ball over on a pretty regular basis. He's consistent with that. We notice it more when it's a close game because it matters more. When Hurts throws that second pick, that cost that the game over. Game's done. Before that pick, you're like, well, they're going to get into field goal range. The question is whether or not Elliott's going to make the kick. They're only 13 yards away from field goal range. They got 20 seconds. They're going to at least get the kickoff. No, turn the ball over, right? When you're winning by 20 and 30 points, which they were last season, they had several blowouts that season, and he throws a pick, you're like, whatever. He got a little happy, he tried to force it in there because everything was working today. No big deal. Well, when it's a one-score game and that's happening, now those possessions matter. Now turning the ball over matters more. So, Mo, I think he's pretty much the same quarterback. I think he had a little bit of a spike last season, but I think his numbers this season are going to be pretty much on par with where he was last season. But I think the difference here is they're playing closer games. They're not blowing people away. As a team, they're not as good as they were last season. So now the mistakes he's making, they matter more.
That's kind of an interesting point you just brought up. It really is. As you're speaking, I'm like, that's a good point. Look, I think we all have our favorite teams, but I think we both are Jalen Hurts fans. I'm a fan of Jalen Hurts. I am. Always have been from the outset. But it's interesting because you point out his production over the breadth of his career has been pretty consistent. He is what he is. I actually had an argument with someone last night after the game. They were saying are you trying to blame Hurts? And I'm like, I'm not blaming Hurts. But when you lose, usually, and you're a big name quarterback, we usually come for you, right? We usually say, well, he didn't do well or he didn't do anything. The only guy that's been getting a pass, if you want to even call it a pass, has been Patrick Mahomes. And that's because it's so blatantly obvious his receiving core is god-awful. But I guess the point I was making last night was I think he's a terrific football player. And key is football player. I feel about him the same way I feel about Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar is a terrific football player. What he does overall makes him a top 10 quarterback. There's no denying that. But does Jalen Hurts have another level he can go to? Or because that's what I put to the person I was debating was, or is this is who he is, and who he is, like you pointed out, it's really dependent on everybody around him. If the defense is playing at an all-time level and you've got 4 or 5 Pro Bowlers on that side of you are dominant. If your offense is dominant, if you're not turning the football over, it kind of elevates him, even though his numbers, like you said, are pretty much the same. And when it's not that way, and you have to kind of rely on him more, and he kind of gets the spotlight on him more, like Josh Allen, there are some struggles. There are the turnovers that all of a sudden they're bigger, right? Even though they were there before, they're bigger. You go, oh my, I can't believe Hurts fumbled the ball. And yet you just pointed out, he's been a fumbler for the longest time. It's not new. He's got a lot of lost fumbles. So I cringe when people say, so you don't think he's the real deal? No, I think he's the real deal, but I think you pointed out something, that their success is collaborative. He is a product of also the guys around him. Yes, he does things to make them better, but they elevated him as well. That's why they were so dominant last year. His numbers, you pointed out, they're going to be on par with what he did with what we would call his breakout year, but it doesn't feel that way because of how the games are so tight and the struggle that they're having. So going forward, if he's going to be this and they're going to be what they are, I don't see them making a deep playoff run.
And Mo, I think when you have a Josh Allen or a Jalen Hurts, and you're seeing this, and I feel comfortable saying this because we're literally seeing it with Josh Allen. The offensive coordinator is that much more important. You saw what happened with the OC last year in Philly. It was a really productive year for Jalen. The turnovers were down, only 6 picks. He already has 12 this season. The touchdowns were up. Overall, he played a higher level of quarterback than he did the season prior with Philly and the glimpses that we saw from him in his rookie year. Now we're seeing a regression. 2 things that stood out to me on such a high level last night during that game. It happened early in the game. He went and he threw a screen pass, and there were basically 2 receivers in the same spot, right? And if not for A.J. Brown kind of walling off the defender from getting his hand on the ball, not just blocking him from making a tackle, walling him off from getting a hand on the ball, it might have been a turnover. And I was just like, oh, that was an ugly play. Well, a quarter later, they go to the same play again with the same result. This time, Devontae Smith is over there trying to block on the screen, and he's a smaller guy, and he gets completely blown up. And my thought process was, why are we going back to that same play? It was almost a catastrophe the first time you ran it with AJ out there, who was a big, big man. And now you want to run it again with someone half his size out there and Devontae Smith, thinking you're going to get a better result out of that. Then you look later in the game, and he's throwing home run balls to who? I'm sorry, I don't know that receiver's name. But why are we throwing home run balls to him? Isn't that the Devontae Smith territory? Isn't that A.J. Brown territory?
Right.
Quez
Watkins?
Yes, Quez. Why are we throwing home run ball? Why is that what we're designing up on offense? And that's the part of it that we don't always look at, right? The offensive design. What are we doing? What are we aiming towards? What are we scheming?
It matters.
That's part of it. It does matter. There are very few quarterbacks, and they're the elite of the elite, where it doesn't matter what the offense calls. They can go out there, they see it, they change it, they move on. Jalen's not that guy. You set him up for success, he will be successful. He has all those tools. You set Josh Allen up for success, he will be successful. He has all those tools. You go out there and you put him in questionable spots, or you're really relying on him to put the cape on sometimes and make things happen, it's 50-50. And when it does happen, Mo, it's great. Jalen Hurts has had some throws that we both have said, how does he do that?
He has the ability. He does. He has moments where he just puts it on a rope. No argument.
Then he has moments where he turns the ball over. And when you're turning the ball over in a 20-17 game or a 17-13 game, it matters. And that's what we saw last night. And that's what we've seen a few times this season with Jalen. Does it mean they're not a good team? No. Does it mean they're not going to the playoffs? No. What it does mean, Mo, is I don't have any more confidence today that they're going to beat the Cowboys or the 49ers in the playoffs, especially the 49ers. And if you're the 49ers, you're sitting here like, oh, poor Dallas. Oh, poor Philly. Because literally you're just watching the biggest threats in the NFC around you struggle mightily. And now maybe the Ravens go in there and they beat the 49ers, and the 49ers are in the same boat.
Sure.
But you're looking at it right now in the NFC, and you're kind of like, all right, the Niners they seem to be separating a little bit. And we'll see where we are in 3 weeks. But the Niners had their three loss struggle earlier, and they've bounced back admirably from it. Let's see what Philly does this weekend. Let's see what Dallas does this weekend. Again,
that's a great point.
I don't think Philly's going to lose to the Giants.
No,
but I didn't think they're going to lose to Seattle either. So
I didn't either. But man, just to go back to that play that you pointed out, so they tried to throw the bubble screen. The first one was so bad that the defender instinctively went to go for the tackle, and he broke the play up. But had he just ran through it, he'd still be running. It would have been it would have been he instinctively went for the breakup. But if he just ran through it, it's a touchdown. It's a pick six. It was that bad. And you're right. Their offensive play calling isn't remotely on par with how the offensive coordinator, who obviously is now in Indy, called the games for them last year. That guy specifically set Jalen Hurts up for success. And it's been a lot more of a grind this season. You pointed out something that a lot of fans, myself included, we miss, in that who your defensive and offensive coordinators, believe it or not, no matter what the talent level you have, the coordinators and how they run their collective systems, it does matter. It impacts games. If you don't believe me, look at the Chargers on both sides of the football. It is a prime example. Look at the Steelers and their struggles on a certain side of the football. We can go throughout the league. It absolutely matters. To the Eagles' credit, with their struggles, they're still one of the better teams in the NFC. And yes, I'm one of those kind of believers that because of the way football is, they have more than enough time to get it together. But I'm looking at their overall body of work, and I just feel like this team is a good team. It doesn't feel like the team from last year where you thought this is a juggernaut.
No, I agree. And I think San Francisco is kind of filling that role right now. But Mo, let's get JG in here. Let's get JG on the show this morning. Now, JG, first of all, how are you this morning,
Good morning, JG.
I'm doing all right. Jalen Hurts let me down in my fantasy league last night. So
you needed the flu game last night, right?
I needed the flu game. Jackson Smith and Jigba ruined me with that last that fourth quarter touchdown. So I've been better. I've been better so far after that Monday night game.
JG, we talked a lot of Eagles football this morning, and we're going to switch things up a little bit. We're going to talk some football with you after I get to this. So Yamamoto is still dominating headlines. New reports came out yesterday that no one's officially made him the $300 million offer. That's just a number that's kind of floating out there. But also something interesting that came out yesterday, and I want to get your take on it. Bryce Harper talked about how he was part of the Phillies contingency. He made a phone call to Yamamoto. And then you look at all the other things that teams do to woo players to come to their organization. And JG, does that make a difference? Does it make a difference if when you're talking to the Phillies, they bring Bryce in to talk to you? Does it make a difference when you're talking to the Yankees if Aaron Judge goes out of his way to talk to you? Does it make a difference when you're talking to the Dodgers if Freddie Freeman shows up to the meeting? Like, as a professional athlete, does that register with you at all? Like, is it just part of it because it's more of a difference if they're not there? Like, are you offended as a free agent if you go to the Yankees pitch and you don't see Aaron Judge? So you got to put him there just because it would be worse if he wasn't there, but him being there doesn't matter. Like, what does that actually mean to a big name free agent who's doing the free agent tour and getting wined and dined? Is that a difference maker? The guy's calling you and saying, because they're all saying the same thing, aren't they? We want you here. Let's go win a championship. They got to be saying the same stuff. I can't imagine, except for Shohei, who can speak his native language. I mean, maybe Bryce can speak it too. I don't know. But aside from that, does it matter?
It matters not so much as far as the person speaking. It's more what they're saying, because now you're talking about, everybody has essentially the same pitch, but they're making a different pitch because of the team, the city, the organization. What is different about the Phillies compared to the Yankees? What is different about the Yankees compared to the Dodgers? What is different between the Dodgers compared to the Red Sox, the Cubs? They're all explaining, hey, this is how this organization does. This is how the front office works. This is how the coaching staff works. This is what the city's like. You got to see the city as an opposing member when you come in and play against us. This is what it's like when you play for the city. Bryce Harper, knowing that, played for the Nationals and then played for the Phillies. He goes, "Hey, I've been to Philadelphia as an opponent, and I've been to Philadelphia as a member of the team. So I can explain to you what's so different about us and what was different about our city." Saying, Judge has only played for the Yankees. He can only say, "Hey, this is how we are for the New York is to Yankee players. This is how." Now, I'll say this: I would think the Yankees would have brought in Hideki Matsui, would have brought in Masahiro Tanaka to at least give the Japanese experience for Yamamoto. But in essence of it, they brought in Judge to have the conversation. I also would, me personally, if you ask my opinion on this, I would have liked to know not just what the star player is like or what their opinion is. Give me the 25th guy on the roster, someone who's not the superstar, and say, "Hey, what is the feeling for you? What is the feeling for you in this organization? What is for the town for you?" If he kind of says the same thing, then great, awesome. But it's about the pitch itself, as far as not just the person who's speaking, but it's about what they're speaking about in the club, what they're speaking about the team, what are they speaking about the city itself. That's what they're wanting to talk more. They want to be able to hear. That's what and then these free agent meetings. What is it that's different from team 1 to team 2, and how is it going to be beneficial for you for these next 4, 5, 6, 7 years, or however long Yamamoto signs for?
Let's jump to some NFL stuff here, JG. Cam Newton is making headlines again. So he made the initial headlines because he was talking about game managers and difference makers, and Mo and I discussed that already. The other thing he was talking about is why he currently isn't in the NFL. And he took it in a direction, and I'm just going to lay out what he said, and we can kind of go from there, because maybe I'm misperceiving what he was putting out there. He talked about how he scares people. He scares people, but he said, "I scare people, quote, because you can't control me. I'm not a puppet. I cut them strings a long time ago." He's talking about the way he dresses. He's talking about his appearance. He's talking about the swagger that he brings to the game. And in his opinion, those are the reasons he's not currently with an NFL team. Now, the person who did this story pushed back a little bit. It was, I believe, Josina Anderson from CBS Sports. She was talking, oh no, I'm sorry, it was Kimberly Martin from ESPN. She was talking about how when he worked out at Auburn coming into the season, the general vibe of the NFL people there was they weren't really overwhelmed with his workout. He wasn't really doing much during his workout that made people kind of go, wow. And then following that workout, he made comments about how he didn't want to be a backup, and he wasn't going to accept a backup role in the NFL because he was still better than current starting quarterbacks. All of that put together led to no one from the NFL offering him a job. Now, he later went back on that and said, "I would consider a backup role," but obviously nothing came from that. And he has said that, according to him, no one has reached out and offered him anything solid for the last 2 seasons in the NFL. JG, why isn't Cam Newton a quarterback in this league today when you're seeing guys like Drew Lock and Trevor Siemian and Joshua Dobbs playing meaningful football this season? Where's Cam?
Cam answered the question without actually having to be to have to explain the answer more than anything else, and that's he does run his mouth too much. He does put himself in a position where he's the outspoken person. And if you're wanting to be a backup in the NFL, guess what? The backup quarterback is usually the quietest guy. You're not the guy. You're not, and you won't be the guy unless they're starting. Drew Lock played the other. Have we ever heard anything about Drew Lock all season? Have we heard anything about DTR in Cleveland?
No.
Taylor Heineke in Atlanta, and he's gotten opportunities to start. The backup quarterback is the quietest person. He sits there and just be quiet and make sure he's ready to go. That's not Cam Newton. Cam Newton, he can backtrack and backpedal as fast as he can to say, "Oh, I'll consider being a backup quarterback." No, because that's not in your mind. You don't want to be, and you're too outspoken to do it. And you're putting it out there now saying, "Well, I scare people." No, you're just not good. You weren't good in New England. I get that. I'll give him a small pass. He didn't have everything that he needed to be successful in New England with that group. I'll give him a small pass for it because there was a lot of issues that were going on. They were still in transition from Tom Brady. The Bill Belichick didn't really know how to utilize him. But I'll small pass for Cam Newton in that aspect of, but he underwhelmed. And if you're underwhelming when you get your opportunity, guess what? You're not going to get that many opportunities to be a starter. You're going to be a backup. But guess what? Backup quarterbacks don't talk as much as Cam Newton does. That's a fact of it. Again, go down the whole checklist. Jameis Winston in New Orleans. We don't hear from Jameis Winston. And Jameis Winston probably could be a starter somewhere right now if he had the opportunity to do so. But guess what? He's the quietest guy on the locker room. He's a team clubhouse guy. He's energetic when he needs to be, but he's not out there running his mouth saying, "Well, hey, I was a starter. I threw for 5,000 yards. I did this. I did this." No, he's not doing that. Cam Newton's still trying to put out there and saying, "Well, hey, here's my resume, and if I'm not getting my opportunity to be a starter, guess what? There's a reason why. It's not because I didn't perform. It's because I scared." You don't scare people, Cam. That's the reason that you used to scare people on the field. You used to. You don't scare people anymore, and that's the problem, So this whole thing of they tell me I need to cut my hair, maybe, and I'm going to be very sensitive in that aspect of maybe that is a true statement that they asked him to cut his hair or whatnot. I'm going to be very very sensitive to that aspect of. But as far as for controlling him and saying that he has to be a certain way, well, guess what? That's a backup quarterback's job. That is what a backup quarterback is. You're there to be there when you're needed. And if you're not needed, you shut up and you sit and wait for your turn. That's all backup quarterbacks, no matter who. So he's outspoken to the point where he's putting himself in a box, and they're not wanting to touch him because again, it's a headache that you don't want to deal with. And again, it's for any backup quarterback that becomes this way. The teams are going to say, well, okay, we'll go find somebody else who's just going to do the job that we need him to be because the backup quarterback has to be the quietest in the room until their opportunity comes.
Mo, Cam Newton spoke to CBS Sports, Josina Anderson, before training camp started, and he alluded to other teams talking about him to cut his dreads or to tone down his fashion or to be a little more quiet. And he straight up told Josina Anderson in June that his unique fashion and his dreadlocks were adversely impacting his odds of returning to the National Football League. And again, I'm not trying to connect dots that are not here, but when he's talking about those types of things, we're naturally going to cross into the culture conversation. We're naturally going to cross into the race conversation. We're naturally going to cross into the outspoken Colin Kaepernick social justice conversation.
Sure.
It's not a big jump to go from what he's saying, because he's not going there. He's on the doorstep to all these things, and he's going to allow people to make those connections on his own, which is smart. But clearly what he's saying is calculated for a reason. And like we said, we don't know if in Carolina or if in New England or if he reached out to another team before those stops and they said, well, if you cut your hair, well you can come in. We don't know. We don't know if those conversations took place. But when he throws that stuff out there, Mo, it opens the door for us to have that conversation. Do you think there's any merit to it? Or is it as simple as you stunk in England, you went back to Carolina, you went 0-6 and played god-awful football in Carolina, and then you had a pro day at Auburn. We'll call it a pro day. You had a workout at Auburn where a bunch of NFL people went down there, and they all walked away being like, eh. And then you said you wanted to be a starter, and that you were better and that you were at least in the top 32 quarterbacks in the league today. Is it that simple? Does it need to be more than that?
So for me, I think it's that simple. Now, what he's doing in a very clever way, because he's a smart guy, he's leaving it out there in the air to imply there are other forces and the reason why he's not in the league or a starter. But JG pointed out something that's so basic. He's always been outspoken. You can get away with being outspoken when he was playing at an elite level, when he was a playmaker, when he was a difference maker. He's on another tier now. He's in another part of his career. And nobody wants a loudmouth backup. He's a backup. He is a backup. He's no longer a difference maker. Now he's the guy where, well, the starter's down. Can Cam Newton win us a game here or there till the starter gets back up? He's that guy, but they need that guy to be all about the team and just playing the game and not running his mouth or being outspoken. And he's become not worth whatever talent he has left. Most GMs are going, I don't want the headache. If he can't just come in here and focus on football, I don't need all the other outside distractions. It's about football. And I think it's not surprising that he would kind of imply that there are forces working against him. It is not a leap when you say he's very much teetering towards the Kaepernick line, right? It's us. And I don't think it's the same thing. Kaepernick was on a whole completely different thing for what Cam is talking about. And I don't think Cam Newton's being banned. I think teams are looking at him and going, as a backup quarterback, is it worth it to bring Cam Newton in over a Drew Lock or a Joshua Dobbs? Probably not. Where's the separation? Those guys are pros who are coming in thinking about themselves and the team. And Cam has a habit of making everything about Cam. And football's the ultimate team sport. It doesn't really have room for a Cam Newton to me. I don't think there are forces against him. He's just not a very good football player anymore. That's the bottom line. He's not a very good football player anymore. He was a bad game manager in New England, and he was a worse game manager when he went back to Carolina. He's beat up. At his peak, when he ran the football the way he ran the football, he took a lot of massive shots, and they've worn him down over the years. He's not the same athlete he was anymore. It's hard when you get knocked off a pedestal to accept the fact that you're a lesser version of what you were. Very few athletes can go, well, the reason why I'm not getting any offers is I'm just not that good anymore. Who says that? No one ever says that. But I'll say it for him. I think his future is with his podcast. Just like RG3, it's over. Focus on the next section of your life, but don't try to stoke up conspiracies that they're afraid of me. The thing about the dreadlocks, there are a lot of guys in the NFL that have dreadlocks, and they're playing, and they're fine. And there are a lot of guys that have fashion styles that's not my bag, but I don't think teams go, well, because the way this guy dressed, we don't want him. There's plenty of guys that dress a little weird, and they're on NFL teams. Cam dresses a little weird, but he's not any good. That's why he's not on the NFL roster.
Have you guys seen some of Travis Kelce's outfits? He should not be wearing half the things that man is wearing.
But to kind of piggyback on what Mo just said, and what the topic is becoming by Newton speaking to what he's speaking, and this is just from my opinion right now in this situation. I'm only speaking for myself. It's a direction to make people uncomfortable. It's a direction to say, well, hey, I'm being blackballed, or I'm being banished, or I'm not given the opportunity because I have dreads, and they want me to cut them, and I'm telling them no, because it's a direction to make people uncomfortable. Where you sit there and say, well, hey, me as a white person, I can't speak about that because I don't know the culture. I don't know the history of it, or and I can't speak anything about it. And that's what the direction of Cam Newton. And I might be speaking completely out of turn. I apologize if that's the case, but it's a direction to make people feel very uncomfortable because, well, hey, I'm still a good football player, but I'm not getting the chance because I'm doing something that people just don't portray in certain areas, or I don't fit in the mold because I have dreads and this.
You're spot on. You're spot on.
It's such a gray area of how to be able to look about it and say, and now you're having a conversation where we're saying we're not talking about the football player Cam Newton anymore. Or, like I said, in 2020, he was very at the best, average at best. And then from Carolina in 2021, which again, Carolina's been a dumpster fire of a team for the last few years, he was really not good. But we're looking at it and saying, well, hey, we're not talking about the football player anymore. We're talking about the person and why he's not getting a job. That's a whole it's a very tough conversation to have. It's a very difficult conversation to have because we have to go back and look at the tape and say, Cam, you weren't good. And guess what? You had another opportunity. If you impressed, I'll put it this way: if he impressed at that workout he had at Auburn, there's a team that actually is needing a quarterback who probably has a system that is built for Cam, and that is Cleveland. Because you have Deshaun Watson, who's a similar player, bigger quarterback who can run, can throw deep. You have a system out there that Cleveland could have looked at and said, yeah, hey, that's the spot Cam Newton could have succeeded at. Guess what? They didn't go that direction because they looked at it and says he wasn't good. So we'll go get a Joe Flacco who we know can at least do the job for us and be able to at least just adhere to the system. But that was your opportunity because the system works for Cam. And they said, no, we're not going that direction. But he's just turning it into a direction where it's very uncomfortable. And that's a wrong direction to have in this situation because, again, speaking as what can we say about it? We're going to say, no, you're not telling the truth, Cam. You're doing things that's wrong. Look at the film, Cam. Watch your own film. Go see that what you were in 2020, 2021, and say and be real. As y'all just said, be real, Cam. That you were not a good football player anymore. You're not a top 32 quarterback. You're not a top 32. You could be a top 64 and be a backup.
Right.
But that's a different conversation he doesn't want to have.
And JG, you bring up a great point. When Cam Newton's the guy, the system's built around Cam. And the backup, if Cam gets hurt, has to adjust to Cam's system, right? When Cam Newton's not the guy, the system's built around quarterback one. So if you're bringing in Cam Newton, you have to keep in the back of your mind, if QB1 goes down, can he run our system? And there's a specific type of system that Cam Newton can run. He is a career passing percentage under 60%. He's not a stand in the pocket and complete the ball accurate and on time kind of guy. And if that's the system you run with quarterback one, why would you even think about bringing Cam Newton in? Because if QB1 goes down, you would have to change everything to make it work for Cam Newton. So like you said, Cleveland is a team that would have been a perfect fit because a lot of what they do with Deshaun Watson fits Cam Newton's skill set. And the fact that they were not interested, not back in May, when he was having his Auburn workout, not during training camp when there was questions of whether or not Deshaun Watson was going to be ready to start the season, not when Deshaun Watson went down, not when their second quarterback wasn't that good, not when their third quarterback wasn't that good. There were 7 different opportunities where the Cleveland Browns could have been like, let's take a run at Cam. We think he can do it. No, they went to the guy who was sitting on the couch who didn't look great with the New York Jets the last couple of seasons in the backup role. They said, you know what? We think he can stand in the pocket and deliver the football. And he has, because that's what they needed in that situation. So I agree. Let's stop talking about the stuff that's not related to football.
Exactly.
Because this isn't a Colin Kaepernick situation where you look at it and you say, he was winning games. He was having success. He was entering the peak of his career, or he was in the middle of the prime of his career. Different situation. JG, before we let you go, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. The NFL suspended Steelers safety, and I keep messing up his name, Damontae Kazee, I think is how we're going to go with it. He had that. It was a bad hit. I'll say it. It wasn't a great look. But again, defense is bang, bang. He didn't leave his feet. The receiver was in the air. The quarterback led him to a spot he probably shouldn't be leading him to as a quarterback. JG, we can go a lot of different ways with this. Should the NFL have dropped the hammer and suspended Kazee for the rest of the season? without pay, by the way. So it's not just hey, we don't like the play you made, so we need to set an example for it. It's also personally, financially impacting the player because he's losing game checks for the next 3 weeks. And I don't know what his contract is. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm willing to bet he's not making enough money where he can just be like, those 3 game checks don't matter. Where do you fall on it?
I got to watch the play, and was it an ugly hit? Yes. Should he have been suspended for 3 games? No. That's way too far in the situation. And again, Minshew put Michael Pittman in a very tough position. Hats off to the courage that Michael Pittman had to go and make that play. Kazee, he didn't launch himself. He did lower himself where, Pittman, in the position Pittman was already in, was in a vulnerable position. Was it a flag? Yes, it was absolutely a flag. Warranted for an ejection? You can have an argument, yes, and you can have an argument, no. In today's NFL, I guess that is an ejection play, and because because it was ejected, they're going to say, well, we're going to suspend you for the NFL. If y'all been paying attention, and I'm sure y'all have, about all these fines that have been going on and whatnot with players, whether it's running backs getting fined for lowering their shoulder and with the ball, lowering the shoulder and running over a cornerback or a safety, blocking linebackers in a certain way, and they get fined for that. Now, this has been a very odd and weird year that players are getting fined and punished for on-field plays that aren't necessarily penalized plays. And yet the NFL is just going around and just saying, well, we're going to fine you $30,000. We're going to fine you $45,000. We're going to fine you this. We're going to fine you that. It's very confusing what you're asking these players to do. And I talked to I talked with people about this recently over the weekend, where again I feel as a former, I played high school football. I didn't play anything in college football wise. Obviously, baseball is my sport. But I played. You asked 20 years ago. You asked guys who played and say, well, hey, how do you tackle guys? Well, hey, we had a bigger target and we were able to hit people, and there was never an issue for it. And I guarantee those older guys, as much as they put their bodies at risk and whatnot, the injuries that have happened 20 years ago probably weren't happening as frequent as we're seeing today. Again, minus the concussions, minus the head injuries and whatnot. But you're talking about the actual injuries of leg injuries and shoulder injuries and whatnot. I guarantee you almost those didn't happen, because what you're doing to these defenders is you're putting them in you have shrunk the box of hitting of the target
exactly
to where you can't. They don't know what to do anymore. They don't know what to do anymore. Where you say, hey, you can't hit high. Okay, and this has been a conversation. I'm repeating this conversation, what has been said by players for so many years. You can't hit high. Okay, well, guess what? We're gonna go hit low. All right, well, you can't hit low anymore. And now, okay, we're gonna wrap up, and then we're gonna drop to the ground because that's the best way. Well, you can't hip drop anymore because you're gonna roll these guys' ankles. I watched the game. I watched the Saints and Giants game yesterday on Sunday, and Alontae Taylor, our nickel corner, he actually goes up and wraps up, puts like perfect technique, puts his arms shoulder to the chest, and it was a hard hit. I mean, hard hit shot. Wrapped him up, dropped him to the ground. 15-yard penalty. Didn't hit him in the head. Didn't lower his head either. Perfectly executed tackle. It was a hard shot. Well, guess what? These guys they're some of the best athletes in the world, running 4.3, 4.4 at 200 to 220 pounds, 220 to 240 pounds, 240 to 260. They're running 4.3. These guys are monsters, and you're asking them, well, hey, you can't play full speed, you can't hit hard, you can't do this. What do you want these guys to do? What is it that you want these guys to do? How do we tackle anymore? And then here's the best part about it. Here's the best question. How do you want them to tackle now so we can teach these kids at 10, 11, 12 years old, going to high school and be able to educate them in the process? Because guess what? I know this for a fact. The NFL is not going to high schools. They're not sending people to high schools and say, or the Pee Wee football leagues and saying, this is how we need to teach the tackle. Because I know this is the Major League Baseball does this. Major League Baseball will send representatives to different youth leagues and start talking about baseball. We'll talk about techniques, talk about this, talk about that. The NBA with the NBA Care program and different programs they have will teach certain aspects of the game for them. Why isn't the NFL doing the same thing? They're not going around teaching. They're going to hold clinics, and they're going to tell people you have to come pay to do this and do that and do that. Then say you got to come to us to learn this. Go send people across the country and say, hey, we want to teach these 10-year-olds how to tackle.
Exactly.
We want these high school kids to learn how to tackle because they don't know what they're doing. Nobody knows how to teach this tackling anymore. When they get to college, it's too late. And then you're going to have the same issues in college that you're having in the professional ranks where these guys don't know how to tackle. I watched LSU, which is one of the best defenses in the country for many years, for almost 2 decades. LSU has been synonymous with some of the best defenses in the country. And I'm watching these guys who don't know how to tackle. I watched Alabama this year, one of the best defenses in the country for 20 years. And I watched them miss tackles. I watched Clemson do the same thing. I watched Florida State do the same thing. I watched Texas. Like, these kids are not tackling well in college. Well, guess what happens when you go to the NFL? You're not tackling well because they don't know what they're doing. Because if they do get a tackle, if they do hit somebody hard, guess what? It's a flag. They're getting fined. And then now, what we're seeing with Damontae Kazee, he gets suspended for 3 games. They have absolutely – the NFL has taken this way out of proportion. Like I said – 20 years ago, if you look back and see what the knee injuries, the shoulder injuries, any of that outside of the head injuries, I guarantee the research would show that the injuries were less 20, 25 years ago than what we're seeing in today's game because these guys don't know what they're supposed to do anymore. They don't know how to tackle. They don't know how to hit players and do it in the way that it's going to make sure that they don't get hurt. To the point, Kazee, he hurt Pittman. It was a dirty. It wasn't a dirty hit. Yes, it was a dirty hit. 3 games worth of suspension. No, I don't think that should have been the case at all. Fine him $40,000, sure. Not 3 game checks.
JG, pleasure as always, sir. We will see you back.
Appreciate the knowledge, JG.
Morning.
As always, guys. See you Thursday.
Have a good one.
Well, before we close out here, interesting story that came across the news ticker involving Tommy Cutlets from the New York Giants. Apparently, Tommy Cutlets had verbally agreed to do an autograph signing, a public appearance for a couple hours at a local New Jersey pizza establishment. They were going to pay him $10,000 to make this appearance. He was going to be there for a couple hours, 2.5 hours. He was going to sign a couple hundred autographs. Obviously, a bunch of people were going to come out to see him. It was going to drive sales. This is why the pizza place was doing it.
Sure.
Well, apparently, leading into the Monday Night Football game, communication between the pizza shop and the agent kind of went dry. And then the agent comes back after Monday Night Football when they knock off the Green Bay Packers, and the fee has doubled. His appearance fee went from $10,000 to $20,000. And the pizza place was basically like, we're a locally owned business. We're a mom and pop's chain.
Right.
We were already committing 10 to you. We can't afford 20. And even if we could, we don't think we're going to get the buy-in or it's going to be good for business to shell out 20.
Sure.
So now there's this feud with his agent where his agent's like, well, there was no contract. Nothing was signed. And they've come back with the receipts of saying, you're right, there was no contract, but we verbally agreed. We set the structure. We are just waiting for the final word. Is this what Tommy needs? I know his agent handles this stuff. He probably didn't even know the inner workings of it. But this is a terrible look for a kid who may not even be on the Giants roster next season. We don't know.
No. It's a bad look. And it's a shiesty look. Like Tommy was becoming this beloved folklore type guy. A comparison, maybe the NFL Jeremy Lin, right? They were loving him. And then you find out that you and your agent are giving this local business a hard time about
shaking down the pizza shop.
Right. Shaking down the mom and pop pizza shop for $20,000. It's a horrible look. It makes you look greedy. And it also I guess makes people look at agents like, see, that's what agents are about. Money grubbing agents. It's just a bad look all around on both sides.
I almost feel like they should be able to go back after the Saints game and be like, well, we'll do 5 now after what you did during the Saints game.
Right. Let's renegotiate. We want to take it down to about 5.
Because if you were worth 20 after Monday Night Football, you're definitely not worth 10 after the Saints game.
Right. We'll give you 5 and a couple of free pies.
Right. Mo, close us out, sir.
Appreciate everybody for all the support, especially up in the chat. Check out all the great content we have to offer to you on Sports Empire Network. Check out the Empire.
Make sure you're here, same time, same place tomorrow. We'll be talking about Ritter being benched once again by the Falcons. Guess what? Aaron Rodgers wants to play football. Should they let him? Should they not let him? We'll discuss that tomorrow. And we're going to break down what the current NFL playoff situation looks like. All of that and more right here. Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show, and we will see you tomorrow morning.
I mean, you can see right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about the team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboy fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready. I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face. Oh, from Brooklyn. Hey, is any